Borrowing other people's creativity. I like it, and I think that we've done a bit of that here at Human Sharing, not only what you thought, but also what the people next to you thought. That is borrowing other people's creativity. Is there a saying that's like plagiarism is the highest form of flattery, or did I make that up? I may have made that up. I swear I've never plagiarized anything in my life. So that was not some like terrible justification for my actions. So let's see here. Hashtag. Has anyone tweeted yet? See, some raised hands, perfect. So, learning is making mistakes. It is actively listening and participating in the world around you. Engagement. Great. So, with these new definitions of creativity and learning, we really see a much more expanded view, I think. And another question I would ask is learning necessarily only that which we think students need to learn in order to graduate? Like, is it just the subjects of math and science, and maybe some arts, maybe some physical education, whatever else is in there? Or can learning be getting really, really into a book and understanding the characters inside and out? Is learning, being able to master a video game? I think that asking questions like that, whether you agree or disagree, is really worth considering, because as we expand definitions of learning, we'll necessarily also have to expand what we think constitutes learning. And this was on a thank you card that the organizers of the conference gave me, actually. It was really sweet. I loved it. And Thomas More quote, which is, "Education is not the piling on of learning, information, data, facts, skills, or abilities, but rather making visible what is hidden as a seed." And I was very taken by this quote because, well, it reminded me of that one, which was like learning is not the filling of a vessel, but the lighting of a flame. I think I quoted that right, hopefully. And it also made me realize that this isn't the operational definition that we usually use in school. Because when I think about what I learn, it usually is information and data and facts. And I think this is something that we can really change. Because we need meaningful projects that don't just necessitate creativity, but motivate it. What I mean by that is that you can probably fairly easily come up with a project that is creative. Honestly, most projects that involve students to do something, to create anything, will be creative. But that does not necessarily solve the problem of making them want to do it. Because just because something is creative doesn't mean I will necessarily have passion attached to the project. It's why my sister made that 3D map of India that involved her spending 5 hours gluing beads onto clay. She didn't really memorize much or learn much from that experience because she wasn't passionate about it and there wasn't a whole lot of deeper meaning in it for her. And so what I'm seeing increasingly is the possibility of project-based learning to get students making a difference and see real-world impacts. And here's a great example from Kira Veersethi's TED Talk, which I think should play, hopefully. And it might take some time to buffer because I know that the internet connection in here is not super great. But she basically is the principal of the Riverside School in India, and they undertake a lot of really innovative projects that are or not. Pause that. Oh, so just to note, like if you're going to be using YouTube videos in a presentation that is already running off the web, like downloading them ahead of time, it's generally a solid idea. However, if said presentation was made very close to the actual date of presenting, that becomes slightly more difficult. So, I think the procrastination is actually a great motivator for creativity, to tell the truth. Because the strange delirium that comes with late nights is just the most uninhibited thing ever. When I say delirium, I mean it's like Wizard's error. Alright, here we go. Hopefully this will upload it. You have seen really motivate students to be creative, that don't just necessitate creativity, but motivate it. Any in your own teaching practice that you might have heard about, that are going on in your school or others? Of making change is easy enough, or it's easy enough to be realistic. So I know a lot of people, for instance, who will get really, really into fundraisers where they can get people to donate things like old pairs of jeans, for instance, because it's something so easy to do, it's something so accessible for teenagers, and I definitely see things like that work out really well when it comes to raising awareness about issues as well. And let's see if this will work now. A little bit of buffer.
Even in the times of HYN1, I like the book. Laughter is contagious, passion is contagious, inspiration.
Really have, but let's pick a topic to learn something more about. What's something that one of you has to cover in your curriculum?
Tunisia.
Tunisia, perfect. So how would we learn about that through a creative project? Yes?
International blogging.
International blogging, perfect. So what we might do here is set up a blog. Sorry for slow taking with one hand. And what sort of things specifically would students be needing to learn about?
Kids' life, background,
Kids'
culture.
life, backgrounds, anything like political involvement? Or?
Not for grade 3.
Oh, grade 3. Okay, I was thinking, wow, if they're starting to cover like the Arab Spring. And go here. Why did I think water would work if YouTube does not? That's okay, we'll just discuss the idea for this. So actually, I think that setting up an international blog is a really good idea. In my own experience, when I was learning about ancient China specifically, I remember that even though I liked history, I wasn't into the subject much. But then I realized that I could set up these blog posts, which I did every week, and my teacher Felicia called them the Becoming an Expert posts. And what I loved about it was it gave me the chance to put myself in the shoes of a historian. And for a young girl to have that sense of power and expertise, it was incredible, and something that would be hard to replicate if I were simply writing essays about ancient China and turning them in. So something like a blog that gives students an authentic audience can be incredibly valuable. What are some other ideas? So we have the idea of an international blog where students from Tunisia, for instance, might come and post about their life and share, kind of like a pen pal correspondence except for the wider audience. What are some other things we do?
Find out what kind of stuff we know. Or think we know.
I'm sorry?
Find out what we think we know about it.
Find out what we think we know. That's a great idea, and it's really valuable for assessment beforehand as well. Oh, yes! That is the most joyful I ever will be about something loading. So, we could just go ahead and create, like, so it'll just be a sample name, and create this blog. And so with this grade 3 class blog, we can post about a lot more. What are some other topics grade 3 students will be learning about?
Food. That's what I gotta say.
Great. So like how to eat nutritious food or any kind of food ingredient?
Tunisian food.
Tunisian food.
Oh, Tunisian food. Okay.
I'm in Tunisia. I'm still in Tunisia.
Meanwhile, back in the States, grade 3 students are learning about not Tunisia. Yeah, the international worldview that Canadian students get is incredible. Just speaking as an American, Canada came very late. And this probably won't load, so instead, why don't we try something which is a little bit lower tech, by lower tech, I mean Microsoft Word and collaborative writing. This is an exercise that I really love to do. Whenever I video conference with students or whenever I was presenting to them in person, we would write a story together and we would get their ideas. So for instance, I don't know much of anything about Tunisian food, but I'm sure that those of you who teach grade 3 do. And so what I'd like to write a story about, or we can write a descriptive paragraph about, is a trip to the market. So what is a Tunisian name?
Muhammad.
Tariq.
Tariq, perfect. Okay, so out of what is an essential ingredient? Dates.
Are you sure?
I'm often out of dates.
It would be pretty hot outside, maybe, or okay. the canopy, what, like if you had a market, what would that cover be called? Awning. And what are some other staple foods? Pomegranates?
Olive oil.
And one more food? Olives. All right, so we have a very short descriptive passage here. Not exactly a story, but you know, we have this kid who's running the market. Tart's mother yelled from the kitchen, "We're out of dates. Run to the market for me, will you?" Fine, Tart grumbled and trudged outside. The 1 mile walk to the market made him weary quickly, so he was grateful to walk under the shade of the awning in one of the vendors' booths at the market. "Some dates, please," he asked the vendor. It was a hot day, and pomegranates looked awfully appealing too. "Some of those, too, and olives." The vendor nodded and handed him the food. Tart sighed. He might have a fair amount of explaining to do when he came home with unasked for items. So the idea is that you could get grade 3 students to really shout out what they know. The food items, you could write something a little longer, you could incorporate other elements of culture. Perhaps Tart doesn't just take an adventure to the market, perhaps he goes and sees a traditional performance, or perhaps he, I don't know what else would happen in an average kid's day. Oh, I'm sure he has to go to school at some point, and you could turn this into maybe a picture book adventure. Or you could take a website like Extra Normal and create an animation. You could make a script so that students who are more into music or video editing could really have a role here. So with something that starts as a collaborative class project, you can really have all this potential to turn into other things. And the great thing is that it wouldn't be limited there. If students took this and turned it, say, into an animated video, then they could share it out and really benefit from seeing, wow, other people are learning from this, and I'm teaching my fellow students or other classes about the topic as well. And the kind of validation you get from that, and the kind of feeling of importance, and wow, I'm teaching somebody something, that gives a lot of purpose to any project. So we see where collaborative writing can come in really handy to see what students know, to get them participating. And I think that this video should have sufficiently buffer that we can watch a little bit more of it at least, because I just want to show the example.
If I something I call the I can bug. So the question is,
Raise their hand or want to say anything. So it led me to develop this hypothesis that as you get older, I think you get a special kind of arthritis in your hand raising joint. I'm not sure exactly what joint that is, but I'm sure it exists. Because if you look at high schoolers, any of you who teach high school probably know this, it can be sometimes just this tremendous struggle to get students to answer questions. And you know, it's much like that stereotypical teacher, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, who has to ask anyone multiple times. I've seen a lot of teachers actually, in my own experience, resort to pretty much that same line. And so I'm hoping that we will have an audience that's a little more open to sharing their ideas today, and I'm sure that you guys all have some wonderful ideas to share. Now, as far as how to share them, we'll have microphones around the room, and you can raise your hand once I ask a question. There's also the option of using Twitter. How many of you have tweeted using the conference hashtag? Raise your hand. Seeing some raised hands, awesome. So for those of you who have smartphones, this is not going to be a phone-free zone at all. I do not mind if you're looking down at your screen and typing something, as long as you are posting on Twitter with the, I think it's what is the hashtag? CTCA 2013. Awesome. So, yeah, quite a mouthful. In thinking about the topic of creativity and action, those of you who were here yesterday, you heard a little bit about my very ideal childhood, playing with all kinds of different weird things, making up stories all the time, and hanging out with my sister in this backyard where we had just really crazy things lying around to do whatever we wanted with. And it made me think about that question, what kind of childhood would you want for your kids, or what kind of childhood did you want? And I'm very glad I wouldn't have traded anything. But I wonder, where does creativity go? How come the creativity that was evident in everything that my sister and I made and the stories that I told, how come that is such an elusive creature in the average student once they are, say, my age? We can blame a lot of societal or environmental factors. You can say students are taking on more passive activities instead of active activities, and we really must look ultimately at the institution where students spend 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, when we think about creativity, which is school. So to best prepare students for a world in which creativity, not ability to follow instructions or remember facts or stick to a strict schedule, is most important, we really have to transform schools from what they unfortunately are in many cases, which is a sort of graveyard of creativity for young students who walk in the doors and find that suddenly they are supposed to color within the lines and fill in the blanks and answer the questions with the one right answer. We have to really change from that model to something where students feel more free to express their ideas so that we don't see that hand-raising arthritis happen, where students feel like their ideas are valid, especially when they are in answer to questions that may have more than one right answer. We can make 21st century education something better than a story of woulda, coulda, shoulda been creatives. I say that because I have lots of friends who have incredible creative force and power in their work. For instance, one of my good friends, Hannah, she's an amazing artist. She's won multiple awards for her writing as well. She self-published a book when she was in 8th grade, and I honestly looked at that and thought, wow, your fantasy writing is better than mine. Why am I out there with my books and speaking and everything, and you're going to school and taking all these AP classes and sort of, in that mold? And I realized that when we set this one strict path for students to follow, they really feel like the alternatives aren't valid. So even if Hannah really could have gone and done something huge and amazing with her art, some kind of like multimedia national project, that didn't happen. And so when I think about 21st century education, I often think about it through the lens of the students I know, people like Hannah, who can and should be allowed to do amazing things with their creativity within school instead of having to wait for the free time afterwards. And I feel incredibly privileged to have been given that opportunity. So I also find creativity extremely important, not just because it's simply fun and it's awesome for us to be able to use our creativity, but because it's essential for success in the 21st century. And I touched upon how this is one of the emerging skills that will really need in the economy, whether we're going to be entrepreneurs, social or otherwise, if we're going to technology, media, the arts, pretty much any field you can think of. If we are not going to be on an assembly line manufacturing stuff, step by step, we will need a strong amount of creativity. And when people think of creativity plus students, there's often this image that comes to mind maybe of the sort of projects that you did when you were in school, but I think that it can really be a whole lot more than that. And to give some examples of students I know, I actually had the chance to meet Dale. He's super nice. Does anyone know about the Thiel Fellowship, or Teal Fellowship? I'm not totally sure how to pronounce it. Seeing a couple raised hands. Well, the Teal Fellowship was started by this billionaire, Peter Thiel. You might know him because he founded PayPal, made a lot of money, and then he went and invested that in the idea that young people can really explore their potential outside of college in a better way. He basically pays young people, this is a gross oversimplification, but he pays young people not to go to college. And it's a very radical idea. I'm sure that some of you are thinking, don't know about that. Well, Dale is one of the fellowship recipients, and the fellowship gives you $50,000 every year for 2 years, so $100,000 total. And they encourage you to take that money and not just, goof around with it. They really want you to undertake the projects for which you applied for the fellowship for. And so Dale, his project is called Uncollege, and it's basically this idea that we pay too much for college and we take away too little, and he wants to get more people to take gap years, to travel around the world, to carry out projects, and he also wrote a book called Hacking Your Education, and he's a big proponent of self-directed learning. Now that's really putting a new face on college dropout, isn't it? Because Dale, in order to receive the fellowship, of course, he was in his studies at the time, in college in Arkansas and he dropped out. And now I think he's probably more successful than anyone would have realized, especially when you say he dropped out of college. And going from college student to dropout to field fellow, that requires a lot of desire to sort of break the rules or break the norms of what we expect of students. And I think that this kind of behavior, not necessarily the dropping out of college part, I personally think going to college is great, but I think that the desire to break norms and not being scared of that is something we should encourage instead of discourage in more students. So if you look at someone like Dale and what he's done with on college and writing his book and now speaking internationally, you can definitely say that's a great example of creativity at work. And then you heard of Jack Andreka? Nope. Okay, so he won the Intel Science Fair just recently for his novel work in the field of being a detector for pancreatic cancer, actually, and it's about 168 times more efficient than the current model, and it's also way more inexpensive, so it's a really great option. And the idea for the pancreatic cancer test came to him when he was in biology class learning about antibodies, and he combined this with some reading he was doing surreptitiously on the side about nanotubes, I think, carbon nanotubes, and so he really connected these two, and something clicked. And when I read that, I really laughed at the surreptitiously part, because to think that you would have to surreptitiously read something as academic as a text about carbon nanotubes in your biology class, that says something very sad. I'm not sure if it's just about his class or about many classes in general, because I've definitely been in situations where I'm reading a book and I'm told to put that down, even if it has to do something with the topic at hand. So Jack Googled nanotubes and cancer biochemistry. He did all this research using free online science journals, and he came up with this idea for this sensor that he really wanted to test out. He had to do lab work. Of course, being your average 15-year-old kid, he didn't exactly have a functioning lab in his house. So what he did was he emailed professors, lots of them, 200 to be exact, and he received exactly 200 rejection emails as well. But he didn't let that stop him. And the 201st email came back from a professor at Johns Hopkins University, and it was a yes. So he went to that lab, he worked, and the result of his project was that diagnostic strip, similar to a testing strip you might use for diabetes or something similar. And it costs around 3 cents each. It's also effective for detecting ovarian and lung cancer due to the same mesothelin biomarker they have in common. So one kid, surreptitiously reading that text about nanotubes and learning about antibodies in biology class, took that idea and turned it into something far wilder in its scope and in its use for humanity than probably anyone would have realized. The thing is that his biology teacher, I'm sure Jack is an amazing student, but would his biology teacher have stood at the front of the room and thought, Jack Andreka, he's going to go find something that will help cure cancer? Probably not the first thought in his or her mind. But probably many of you walk into classrooms where there are Jack Andrekas just waiting to happen, but they need the chance to be creative, not have to read surreptitiously under the desk or on their phones, whatever they might be doing that will help them in their projects. And as a third example, Susanna Benjamin is a photographer. She's now a sophomore at Yale, and she started her incredible photography work back when she was in middle school when she first received a point-and-shoot camera for Christmas. And she has really done some incredible work because her photography isn't just aesthetically beautiful. It really has a great social message within it. So, for instance, some of her work about bullying and girls in isolation, you can see this is one of hers that she did, which I was really struck by. She'll do some incredibly creative things in order to capture pictures like this. You can imagine the work that it must have taken to saran wrap a classroom full of girls. And she's also coated people in honey and thrown flour all over, and I think that I saw one of her recent photographs and she broke like about 20 eggs. There's all these crazy ideas going on. Now, I'm trying to imagine what my parents' reaction would be if I bought a carton of eggs and I was like, I'm going to get a model to just sit here and I'm going to throw eggs at them and I'm going to take a picture and this is going to work out really well. My parents are extremely nice people and they're really open to all sorts of ideas, but even they, I'm guessing, would kind of be like, what are you thinking? Now imagine what a teacher or administrator's reaction would be. I'm guessing that it would be probably along the same lines. Yet, just like there are Jack and Drenkas and Dale Stevens waiting to happen, there are plenty of Susanna Benjamins who are looking for outlets for their artistic talent and creativity in ways that might not be appreciated within an hour of class time, because there really is no class on how to bring forth social messages in your photography using surreal aspects. And she does this really incredibly. She takes photos, like these are two others, and you can look up her work on Flickr. It's pretty great. And so we have to really give students types of meaningful projects that will allow them to do work like their photography or their advocacy or their science research. But I've been saying a lot about creativity, and I feel like even though there are these examples of young people who really embody it, it's still a rather abstract concept for most people. You can go by the dictionary definition that creativity is creating something or the ability to create something, but I'd really like to know what you think. What is creativity? What does creativity look like? So you can tweet into the hashtag, or you can raise your hand to share. Any ideas? I don't know if you all saw him, but he gestured in my arm. Come on, we can defeat this hand-raising arthritis, or I'll pick on someone. What do you think creativity is? I don't know. That's the perfect answer. Sometimes creativity is not knowing. And I think that that's great. What else is creativity?
It's looking at things with fresh eyes, forgetting what we know, and coming to it anew.
Perfect. It's looking at something with fresh eyes, coming at it anew. I think that's a very valuable definition of creativity, and that's actually why I would say that not knowing can sometimes be one of the best places to start. Because if you feel like you know everything, then you might not feel that obligated to learn more. Any other ideas on what is creativity back here?
I think it's a second of complete clarity, understanding.
A second of complete clarity and understanding. Great. I really like that. How many people have experienced that moment? Raise your hands. Seeing some raised hands? Okay, so we need to really get more creative in this room so we can have many, many more moments like that. And, oh, I realized there were microphones right there. Wow. Any other brave souls? What is creativity?
I think it's taking risks.
It's taking risks, exactly, like you just did. So that's a perfect definition. I'm really hoping that we can, to some extent, embody what creativity is today. By taking risks, raising your hands, answering questions, by having moments of clarity, maybe from talking to a neighbor, or by really thinking about a concept differently. And I'm thinking that creativity can also sometimes be embodied by the collaboration that happens when this many people in a room get together and bounce ideas off of each other. Because creativity, much as we talk about it being original, oftentimes happens because people think, oh, so-and-so had a really great idea, how can I turn that into something better, or really look at it in my own way. So we have great definitions for creativity. And another question, what is learning? And I should check out the discussion on the hashtag. Hopefully internet is working. So actually, while I'm doing that, why don't you talk to the person next to you and ask them what is learning? Child labor, or tell the students what the issues were and how endemic it was in that part of India. She actually had students spend 8 hours rolling incense sticks to mimic the life exactly that a child laborer would have had on a day like that. And the way that she said it was, after 2 hours, when their backs broke, they were changed. They realized that they had to go out and do something. So after having this incredible experience of really being quite literally in the shoes of a child laborer for one day, these students went out, they hit the city, they talked to vendors, they talked to business people, they talked to parents, they talked to kids and families in slums. They just did everything in their power to convince everyone that child labor was absolutely wrong and had to be abolished. Now, if you just walked into a class and you said, there's this important issue, and we're going to tell you about it, and here are some stats, then your average elementary school child might not feel super compelled to just walk out of the door and start telling people about it. But when you have an experience that really makes it visceral and close, then you can create something really powerful. Another thing is asking students what issues they care about deeply. What are things that they want to change? What are problems they see in their school, in their community, in their world? And then you can take that and really turn it into action. So for instance, I know that after the Lorax came out, a group of students, I believe they were 5th graders, they and their teacher made this petition on change.org to Universal Studios saying, include more environmental education on the Lorax website, because we feel that this is a movie that has really lost some of its meaning if we don't have this education component. And they were actually successful with their petition because they got so many people to sign it, I think tens of thousands of people came on board. And so this petition that one elementary school classroom came up with ended up touching many lives. Another powerful example of students taking action on an issue they care about comes from Julia Bloom. And she was a girl who decided, I don't like the way that 17 magazine portrays girls because it affects young girls like me and how we see ourselves and the kind of image that we want to have. And so she created a petition to 17 magazine saying, stop photoshopping girls, or at least have one photo spread per magazine where girls haven't been photoshopped, to take out all the blemishes, to make them thinner, and all that. And one photo spread per magazine is not a lot to ask. And of course, tens of thousands of people signed her petition as well. She got meetings with 17, and the organization that she works with also then went after Teen Vogue and other girls' magazines. So change.org is being extremely slow to load, but you can see that it's very easy to just click this start a petition. And the great thing that I think students gain from doing something like starting a petition, and of course it can be about a non-political topic so that it's not as controversial. It could be something more like, let's give funding to plant X number of trees, for instance, at this school, or something similar to that. The great thing about this is that it's authentic impact, and it's also very quantifiable impact, because you see the number of people who have signed your petition. And you see directly that if you make a video that is extremely persuasive and that gets a lot of views, then the number of people who sign your petition goes up. And if you just kind of sit around and you don't do anything, then you won't get a whole lot of support for your issue. So after talking about an issue, after discussing something in the class, after making them care about it, there's this amazing way to really extend the reach of that learning, make it something that can change their lives as well as someone else's. And so getting students to do something like a petition on change.org to work on that as a class is an incredible idea. And you can see that they have had all kinds of really great things happen, and so many have been driven by young people. 13-year-old girl fights for a plastic bag ban. And another great idea that I've seen to be really motivating in personal experience, you might have heard, obviously, Jack and Jacob won the Intel Science Fair, and then there are young people who win contests like the Google Science Fair, which I know is still accepting nominations, entries. If you have students who you think could be really motivated by working on a project, suggest that they enter the Google Science Fair. But I would also say that it's not necessarily just about the students who are always raising their hands and always have the right answers in class. It may also be about the students who say, I don't like science, because you never know what incredible talents might be discovered when they have the confidence and they have the passion that could be inspired by really wanting to win something or working with a team of people who motivate them. And so that's the great thing about these creative projects that are motivating in creativity as well as necessitating that they really get people to work together and discover possibly unknown talents. So these are some of the ones that are happening. There are some about education, like we want our extracurriculars back, which was interesting. And it's really a great way to start change. And you can see like they have varying numbers of signatures, thousands, some have hundreds of thousands. So I would say that ahead of us are these really possible divergent futures for the students that we welcome into our classes. One is the same as it's always been. The majority will carry out the assignments that they don't really like, and they might take classes in college that they don't enjoy to get a job that they don't care about. And I feel like we really need to set higher expectations early so that students get used to, instead of deferring their dreams, instead of putting their passions behind them and thinking school is the place where I go to not be creative but rather to follow instructions. I think that we need to make school a hotbed of creativity and ingenuity, places that more closely resemble the exciting ethos of a startup, for instance, than they do what we usually think about school. We can see students getting used to making their dreams come true. We can see students finding jobs that they feel they can imagine and growing, and dreaming up new jobs and new companies and new innovations if they feel that the status quo isn't enough. Creativity, I think that maybe I mentioned it as a kind of delirium late at night, and we've heard some amazing definitions today about creativity as well as learning. But I also feel like it's a sort of tormenting dissatisfaction. It's something that drives you to create and make and build and shape all that is not as it should be or that can be better, all that hasn't been created yet. And I think that most people would agree that our world needs a whole lot more of that kind of creating. So in bringing students for opportunities to do things like make petitions, to start blogs, to carry out large multimedia projects, to take on the challenges of organizing conferences or events at school. These are things which you might say, well, we have to really teach them the basics, and this is all very nice and well, but it's sort of fluffy. But I've seen in personal experience that students retain so much more of that basic information, and that they learn so much more as well about the things that are more difficult to teach with tests, things like teamwork and leadership and character. So I would say that this can really be an important and integral part of the future of education. And I'd be happy to answer any questions now.
Your passion is clearly the arts and English language arts in particular, but how would you say you can apply some of these same ideas to math and science, which are both also very creative things, but perhaps don't, kids don't seem to be reached in the same way as some of the ideas that you've pointed out?
That's a great question, and definitely I do come from more of a humanities arts background, but when I think about science and math, I'm definitely motivated by the stories of people like Jack. And I think also as someone who's not, naturally talented at science and math, that I really enjoy having the chance to, when I know something, because that is such a rare occurrence, I really love to have the chance to share that. And so anything, whether it's in presentations or writing papers, and I know that sounds really strange, like writing a paper would motivate me in science, but honestly, like some of the things that I've enjoyed most have been when I play my strengths, but it's in a way that allows me to show what I know in a topic that I'm not so good at. For students who really enjoy science and math, there are so many awesome projects that I can think of. I know, for instance, that there's a class in Arizona that took on the project of raising awareness of buffalo grass, which is probably not a huge problem here in Canada, but in the American South it was introduced as a cheap way, a cheap cattle feed, and so then it became invasive, it spread really quickly, and it's very flammable, so it's a problem with wildfires. Anyhow, the students found out about this issue when they were doing a unit on invasive plants, and they decided to do something kind of similar to summer petition. They made a video with buffalo wrap. They got a lot of awareness about it in their local community. So anything that allows students to connect the things that they're learning about science and math is so very easy, because if you're learning about vaccinations or antibodies or anatomy in your 10th grade biology, or if you're learning about something having to do with environmental management, there are so many ways that you could then put that learning into use when it comes to solving problems. So yeah, I'd say that those will all be really inspirational. Any other questions? Yes. And I think there are microphones set up on either aisle as well, so if you're further back.
Have you been to any classrooms in Calgary? Because I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I think there's some pretty incredible things going on in Calgary. Or have you basically done a lot of your observations in American schools?
Great question. And yeah, I know when I came to Calgary and I started hearing about teachers using Facebook and Twitter for communication, I felt like I'd emerged from the dark ages of my own personal experience. But I haven't had the chance to visit classrooms in Calgary in person, but I've actually done a fair amount of video conferences with schools here. So, and I'm not sure if anyone here has taught classes that I video conference with, but I'm really lucky to experience working with students in that way. I definitely love to come back to Calgary and see some of the amazing work that you're doing with your students, though, because that would give me a lot to take home and speak about. And there's nothing that will get Americans more riled up than we need to catch up with that other country. So, of course, it might also get me muted off stage, but oh well. Any other questions?
Thank you very much for your insights this morning. I was just curious, it seems in your presentations that you're talking about student voice and how you can create creative outlets for that. What is one thing that you could maybe put towards teachers in this conference room about a youthful voice that may be falling on deaf ears?
Could you, let's see, I want to make sure I understand your question. What is one thing I could pose as far as making sure that
A youthful cultural movement, or perhaps one of these things that maybe we're just as educators not picking up on that would provide creative opportunities?
I think that one of the biggest trends that I'm seeing, and this has been around since, I don't know, since songs were used, I guess, to spread messages, but I think that the use of art as social commentary and the use of art for social activism is really becoming increasingly important as everything is more, it can be virally shared. As an example, the rapper from Seattle, Macklemore, produced a really well-known song, which was coincidentally around the same time as a vote went up about gay marriage in Washington State. And that song really took off because it was basically speaking to that issue. And I think that I'm seeing it reflected in so many songs that speaks to a wide array of issues. And so, I was talking about petitions and more traditional ways of really getting the word out, but for students to have the power to really emulate what they see in society, which is all kinds of videos being used to raise awareness, then I think that that's something awesome and a facet of digital culture that I think should be paid attention to. Because when we talk about viral videos, we often think about Cats or Rebecca Black and Friday and such, but really a lot of viral videos can actually be incredible forces for good. And any other questions?
Good morning, Adora. I have a comment before you wrap up. I just want to thank you. I think you're very brave, and I think that for anyone who's shown up this morning to listen to you, we're a crowd of people who are deeply interested in making school more relevant and more motivating and exciting for young people. I think also, as I'm listening to you, and perhaps for other people in this room as well, we're balancing these organizational challenges and these generational barriers and all of these other things that seem to interfere with our ability to operationalize around your ideas. But I thank you for putting your vision out there. You've affected me. I came last night and listened to you, and I had to come back again this morning. I'm not too sure what my next step is around this gauntlet that you've laid down for us, but I just wanted to thank you for being brave and showing up in this room full of folks and telling your story. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate everyone's attention this morning. I apologize for the technical difficulties, but just as a quick note about some of the resources that I was planning on showing. If you do want to look up Kira Mirsath's TED Talk, it is an incredible presentation, and she has some great data as well that she pulled from Riverside. And then I also have a series of videos called Teach Teachers Tech. If you Google a platform for good and you put teachers, you'll be able to find all those videos. I'm sure that you won't really need the teaching tech aspect of it, but it has some videos about change.org and also the use of games in education. If you wanted to find out more about Code Day, which I mentioned yesterday as an example of a great center for people to be creative and really inspiring student passion, that can all be found if you just Google Student R&D or Code Day. So when I think about, I know that a lot of you face incredible organizational challenges when it comes to starting major events or, maybe planning changes to curriculum, but I feel like there are many ways that things as simple as petitions or blogs or getting students to really produce work that is seen by an authentic audience can be implemented in daily ways. So thank you so much for your attention. I hope you all have a great day.
Books, honey. Adora. You have a book.